How's it going, everybody? You're listening to Trail Tales. My name is Kyle O'Grady. I am a thru-hiker. I am a peak bagger. I am a huge hiking nerd, and every single week on this podcast, I chat with other thru-hikers, other peak baggers, and other hiking nerds about their experiences on the trail. And let me tell you, folks, big episode. This is a big episode. Juniper Hikes is on the show. He recently passed the 10,000 mile mark. Absolutely insane. This dude has done the International Appalachian Trail. That is, he has hiked all the way from Quebec to Florida. Just super crazy. We talk a little bit about that, and most of the conversation is actually focused around the Florida Trail. It's been a long time since the Florida Trail has been talked about on this podcast, and basically what we do for the first part of the episode, the first half I'd say, is I go through some of my concerns with the Florida Trail. You know, as a Vermonter, lived here my whole life, Florida kind of scares me a little bit, honestly, so I go through things like the snakes and the water and the roadwalks and all of the, quote, negative things that I hear about the Florida Trail, and Juniper basically kind of talks about those things and tries to sell me on why they're not that bad, and I gotta say, he did a pretty good job because my mind is changing about the Florida Trail, and it was just a lot of fun. We talk about mail drops. Towards the end, we just get into a bunch of stuff. So yeah, great conversation. And Juniper, when you hear this, thank you so much for coming on, and we're gonna have to do another episode soon. Folks, I know you're all locked inside right now, so you have nothing better to do than go scroll through social media. So Instagram, go follow me on Instagram. The show's Instagram is at Trail Tales Pod, and my personal Instagram is at Kyle Hates Hiking. If you're new, if this is your first time listening, head over to trailtalespod.com. I have 70 other episodes posted right now that you can go listen to after this one, so go check out the website, go listen to some older episodes. And my YouTube channel is Kyle Hates Hiking. I know some of you have already subscribed, but if you haven't and you like watching hiking YouTube videos, be sure to go check out my channel. Folks, we're gonna keep this one real short. Let's get into it. My conversation with Juniper Hikes, Florida Trail class of 2020, as well as insert trail here class of insert year here, because this dude has done so much stuff. It's unbelievable. Juniper Hikes, let's do it. All right, here we go. Juniper Hikes, what's up, man? Thanks so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on here. This will be a lot of fun.
Dude,
I love these things.
These are always fun. It's like, it's perfect right now because we're all stuck inside, and hikers can just ramble about shit for hours and hours. We're not going to go for hours and hours, but for a long time anyways. So yeah, dude.
Yeah, and get to know you and get to know new people or have new people hear, you know, what's kind of going on. I recently finished the Florida Trail, so happy to talk about that.
Yeah,
and all
man.
this other stuff. So
it's been a while. It's been a while since I've talked about the Florida Trail, and I think we'll do a decent amount of that today. So this is what I was talking about before we started recording here. I want you, over the course of the Florida Trail part of the conversation, I want you to really try to sell me on it, okay? So I've talked to a few people on past episodes that have hiked it, most notably Baker Bocorny, as many of my listeners know at this point. But he's from Florida, and you're from Florida too. That's my understanding. And I feel like you two are the only people I've ever heard that really say positive things about the Florida Trail. So I don't know if there's a correlation there. I've never hiked the Florida Trail. I've only been to Florida a couple times. So yeah, anyways, I want you to sell me on this trail, okay? Because obviously you've done a lot of stuff elsewhere as well, so you've got a good frame of reference there. Before we get into that, why don't you just go ahead, and I'm sure most people listening know who you are and all that stuff, but just introduce yourself, how you got into hiking, what you've done, all that stuff.
Well, I'm Juniper, and I actually just recently here on the Florida Trail crossed my 10,000 mile mark. So I've hiked 10,000 miles on long distance trails across the country, which I don't know, kind of starting off, maybe I felt, it was something I just had this immense passion for. And, I felt like maybe I would get to that point, but certainly a lot of people will hike one trail and then, find a career and settle down and all that stuff. And I guess I just never really did. So Jupiter, I'm actually from South Florida. So I've done a lot of hiking throughout Florida. I've done the Florida Trail twice. I've done the Appalachian Trail, the International Appalachian Trail, Pinhoti Trail, the Sheltowee Trace Trail, half of the Pacific Northwest Trail, about half of the Pacific Crest Trail, the Uinta Highline Trail, all sorts of stuff all over the country. And a lot of them have been actually smaller, lesser known trails, so as we're going to get into the Florida Trail, that is also a smaller, lesser known trail, and you'll see a lot of correlations, or I'll mention some, with some of these others, the Sheltowee Trace or the Pacific Northwest, and kind of how those trails compare.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, I've lived in South Florida for pretty much my entire life, except maybe the last 5 years or something. I guess maybe 6 months out of each year I've been hiking, somewhere. So, basically come back to Florida for the winters when the rest of the hiking trails are under the snow. And currently I'm actually in Arizona. So in Arizona, my girlfriend's from here, and we're kind of hanging out. And I was planning on doing the Arizona Trail, but that's not really going to be happening. So that's okay. I figure now's a great time to kind of settle down, relook at gear as I always do, get back into painting a bit since I've been off hiking, and, do all the things that I've kind of been putting off.
Yeah, man. Hopefully get some more videos out too. And I know you've been posting the ones from your most recent Florida trail hike, and those have been really cool to watch. So it's definitely a good opportunity to just kind of sit down and crank out the content.
Yeah, I think so. And just, other stuff as well. I've been doing regular maintenance on my car. I changed the oil and doing taxes. And it's been great because this is stuff that otherwise, I'd probably be off somewhere else and not get to that so quickly.
Yeah, man. I feel you. You're a really good guest for the show because, as many of my listeners know, I like to do episodes on those smaller, lesser known trails. So, I've talked about, like I said, the Florida Trail a couple times, the Arizona Trail. I've talked about the Long Trail, the Northville Placid Trail, Cohos Trail, decent amount of trails up here in the Northeast. But I love talking about this stuff. And of course, lots of episodes on the AT and the PCT as well. But those smaller trails, I don't know, they're just... First of all, it's nice to kind of encourage people to get out and explore some shit they might not have known about otherwise.
Yeah, or explore your backyard. For the people that live in Kentucky that go off and hike the Appalachian Trail, it's the Appalachian Trail is really cool, but so is the Sheltowee Trace, and that's right there for you. Or, so many different states so many states have long trails, and so many states have these incredible areas that I've come to find and love. And so exploring your backyard instead of having to travel across the country for one of the Triple Crown, I think, is a very special thing. Oh, yeah, for sure. I've only briefly talked about that Sheltowee Trace Trail, or I don't even think we got into it. What is it, 300 something miles? I honestly don't even know. Yeah, I honestly forget as well, but I think it's right around 330. Okay. And they were planning on extending it because it doesn't go quite from border to border. So they're going to extend it a little bit further in the north, and it already goes down south into Tennessee, but I guess they're going to have it go even further. So, these trails growing and getting better year after year. And, especially with the Sheltowee, I had discovered that the GPS track I was using was actually outdated, and now there were certain areas that they had rerouted and were way better than they were before. What might have been on a forest road is now following the banks of a lake or something. Oh, cool. Yeah, so that was really awesome to see. See, I don't know anything about Kentucky, but I don't really picture there being that much there, but I have heard some cool things about that trail, so. Well, that's why I wanted to go. I said to myself, and you can say this about many, many, many states, but, who says they're going on vacation and they're going to Kentucky or maybe Kansas or something, or I don't know. But Kentucky is actually, and any rock climber would know this, Kentucky is home to the Red River Gorge. Oh, that's true. Which is I've heard about that and stuff. It is, a rock climbing mecca. I actually, through hiking, I went to this little pizza shop, Miguel's Pizza, and I thought it was just going to be this tiny little pizza place, good local pizza. Mm-hmm. And here there was 300 rock climbers, the living out of their vans outside of the pizza shop and camping out back of the pizza shop. And, this was right in the gorge, and, they know that that's a special place. And I was kind of getting to see a lot of that too. Yeah.
Dude, that is so true, like with the small trails. I was actually talking to somebody about this the other day. There's this trail down in Arkansas, the Ozarks Highlands Trail.
Yeah, the Ozark Highlands, the Ouachita, and the Ozark Trail. Those three are all parallel each other. I think the Ouachita is the most southern one, and Ozark Trail, Ozark Highlands maybe. But I've heard those are awesome trails too, and I really wanted to do one of those this year as well, but the timing hasn't quite worked out.
Yeah, it's tough right
I was
now.
on the Florida Trail a little bit longer than I was planning, so, but all three of those trails are like 200 something miles or 300 miles, and they all look awesome. Just incredible like rock formations and rock walls, and yeah, very exciting.
It's just like I have like all these little trails on my list, and that's one of them. And a huge reason why, honestly, is because I'm just like, there's no other like reason that I'm ever going to go to like Arkansas, like it's, if anything, it's because I'm kind of like a geography nerd and I want to visit every state and all this stuff. But like, I feel like I just don't have a reason to go to like freaking Arkansas other than to do a trail. And that could be true for lots of other places, throughout the country or even the world. So it's almost just like an excuse to get out to places. And so I'm glad that I know a lot of people listening feel this way as well. I'm just glad that people kind of understand that there are other trails to talk about besides the to hike and talk about stuff besides just the AT and the PCT and stuff. So anyways, dude, Florida Trail. So you've done it a couple times, right?
Yeah, this was actually my second time through hiking it, though just various section hikes and things. I guess I've gathered quite a lot of miles, not through hiking it as well, just doing smaller sections here and there.
Well, isn't there a certain section of it that you've done like a bunch of times, or like it's almost like its own little trail or something? I'm not really sure, honestly.
Yeah, I'm from Jupiter, Florida, which is kind of like a sleepy little surfer town on the coast, or at least it used to be. Now I guess more people are moving there. Mm-hmm. But Jupiter and Palm Beach County is home to the Ocean to Lake Trail. The Ocean to Lake Trail isn't part of the National Scenic Trail per se, so you'll never hit it if you're through hiking the Florida Trail, unless you really want to add on like 60 miles or something. But it's a 60-mile side trail on the Florida Trail.
Oh, okay.
And it goes from Lake Okeechobee all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. So it's got these really two awesome termini. You're either starting at this massive lake that's like, half the size of Rhode Island, or you're finishing on a beach. So that's a really cool little feature. But it's this 60-mile trail, and I've always felt that it's kind of, if you're going to hike the Florida Trail, that this is a great primer, because this path takes you through so many of the different ecosystems that you're going to run into out on the National Scenic Trail. You go through these sand dunes near the coast, or the slash pine forests, or the oak hammocks and palm hammocks, and the swamps and wetlands. And so you really get a good feel for like what Florida is by doing that trail. And I've done that trail, I think like 20 times or 21 times. So, you do the math on 62 miles plus or times 20, and it's quite a few. But yeah, that was always like my training grounds for, because I've always been a big advocate of, if you don't have a lot of hiking experience, but you want to hike the Appalachian Trail, the best thing to do is maybe not just get online and kill yourself looking at gear. It's to get out and go hiking. It's to get out and go backpacking. So that's what I used it for, is just, training grounds and testing out gear and testing out myself. And, so it's phenomenal to have something like that nearby. And I think a lot of people have similar things nearby, or at least close enough to get out a couple times here or there throughout the year.
It's cool to hear about that, because we'll see based on how this conversation goes, but I've kind of always been in the camp of, I don't think I'm ever going to hike the Florida Trail, or not a strong desire to hike the Florida Trail, but it would be cool to just kind of do like a shorter hike down there. Like I wouldn't just rule out ever hiking in Florida completely. So maybe I should just start with that like shorter trail first, and then really kind of decide whether or not I can if I can deal with the Florida shit. I don't know.
Another great section that I have always recommended is the Swanee River section of the Florida Trail, and it's, again, 60 miles. So, this is something you can do in a break from work, or break from your career, for family, without really investing a lot of time or money into it. So the 60 miles, you're hiking along the Swanee River the entire way. It's just this beautiful ancient river with these like towering oaks above it. There's even like 2 shelters along this 60-mile stretch, and
nice.
a nice little town. Or you could always leave trail, and there's like little gas stations that aren't too far off. So if you wanted to get coffee or a little chicken sandwich or something, you could do that as well. Cool. But the Swanee River, that's like the other section that I'd totally recommend.
Dude, tell me about the camping on the Florida Trail. So I talked about this with Baker way back like over a year ago on our last Florida Trail episode, but I do want to hear it again. So that's one of the things whenever I'm talking about a trail I've never hiked or a trail I don't really know that much about, I always wonder about camping, right? Because I'm used to, the AT, the Long Trail, the Adirondacks, where there's, frequent shelters and lean-tos and stuff. And in just like established campsites that are marked and have like privies and all this stuff. So I'm always kind of curious, when I'm hearing about these other trails. And it sounds like there are like some established campsites on the Florida Trail, shelters and stuff.
Yeah, there are over the entire Florida Scenic Trail. There's I think 10 shelters, so it's maybe like one every 100 miles. Okay. Some of those are kind of on the because there's alternate routes. You can go east around this way or west around that way, or you could finish at Alabama, or you could finish on the beach. So some of those shelters are on sections that people don't do as frequently.
Okay.
But yeah, there's totally shelters out there, and there's definitely established campsites with the whole picnic table and the fire ring and a pump for water, or just a nice little stream or something. There's certainly a lot of established campsites. But then also like the dispersed camping is great. I think me and Lotus, my girlfriend, we most of the time just camped wherever we kind of felt like stopping, or maybe found like some beautiful hammock of trees to camp underneath. And, we never really had a problem with that at all.
Are there like, like stealth sites and stuff too, like kind of like the AT, where you'll see a spot that has obviously been camped at before, but is not like an official site? Are you camping in spots like that, or is it more just like straight up like legitimate stealth camping where there's been like no impact or anything like that?
Yeah, I'd say it's more so like legitimate stealth camping. You don't really have to, like on the Appalachian Trail, you don't really have to deal with rocky terrain or anything. The soil and the ground in Florida is all very like plush to sleep on. As I'm sure many of you know, I sleep on like the thinnest of thin foam mats. So,
love it.
The Florida ground is perfect for it, either grassy or leafy or leaves. And yeah, so there's plenty of stealth camping, but it's definitely, you wouldn't really know that anyone else has camped there before. But if it's really beautiful, you can be sure someone had. Interesting.
Okay, so let's talk about the bad stuff, or what I perceive as the bad stuff. So I'm just trying to think like off the top of my head. So I'm just going to go through a couple of the things from most obvious to least obvious, because I will stop thinking of things eventually. Like the bad things that come to mind when I think about the Florida Trail, and I'll have you either rebuke them or speak to them or whatever. Anyway, so the first and most obvious one for me is the I'm sure everyone knows what I'm about to say, like the water, dude, the freaking swamps and walking through that shit. Like, talk about that. Like, that's crazy.
Okay, yeah. So the Florida Trail and just Florida in general, it changes so fast. So this year was actually a dry year. I hiked this trail in 2017, and that was also a dry year. So this hike, I only had to get my shoes wet like twice.
Okay.
It wasn't even that bad. And all of that was, those 2 times were in the southern 30 miles, the southernmost 30 miles of the entire trail. Those are the only times I really got my feet wet. And same with my other through hike of it. So you may just get lucky and be hiking during a dry year. Or, you could always plan to do something else if the water really like freaks you out that much. As we were mentioning, there's the Ouachita Trail, or, a lot of trails that would be good in the winter beyond the Florida Trail as well. And I'm always happy, you don't have to hike something you don't want to. There's plenty of options out there.
Sure.
But yeah, the water walking, some years can be bad, but it is pretty rare that you would be running into like just sustained hiking through swamps.
Okay, so like how, I know, and again, I know it varies, but like how long, at least just from your experience, like how long are you hiking in the water for? Is it just like a half mile, or just like, a large river basically? Or are you doing it for like 5, 6, like all day? Like how much? Yeah.
Well, the southernmost 30 miles through Big Cypress. Big Cypress is the Everglades. It is a swamp. It is wetlands, so those 30 miles are totally wet.
Damn.
Actually, this year it was so dry that only like 10 of those miles were wet. But typically you can imagine 30 miles walking through water right off the bat for northbounders at least.
What about like camping?
Camping, well, there's all these like little islands, and that's actually really cool.
Oh, that is
you're walking
cool.
you're walking through water, but then you come across this nice island, and it's a hammock with all these like trees over top of you. So that's really beautiful. But yeah, during a wet year, there's sections that will be wet. Kissimmee Prairie Preserve is generally pretty wet, and Bradwell Bay is known as like the hardest swamp on the trail, which both times I did it was bone dry. So
nice.
Never got to experience that, I guess.
Damn.
But so there's sections that are like known to be wet, and it would generally just be for like, a quarter of a day or a half of a day, or like this year, every time we basically had to get our feet wet, I was able to just take off my shoes, so I didn't even have to really get my shoes wet at all.
Oh, damn.
So, it's not that bad, but it does vary greatly from year to year. There was a section up north where me and Lotus were walking across this boardwalk, and this boardwalk over a dry swamp, totally dry.
Okay.
So it seemed to us like the boardwalk doesn't even need to be here. We saw pictures from a month later of the northbounders going over that same boardwalk where they were walking through ankle-deep water on the boardwalk.
Oh, wow. Damn.
Yeah. So things can change fast. They really can. But at the same time, these sections are few and far between unless you're really hiking during a super, super wet year. Which that in itself would be a very interesting experience. So
yeah, really.
But I definitely understand people's fear with that. I just think the fear of walking through water, it's never that bad. And once you take that first step, it's nothing but just refreshing. You have some gators maybe to keep.
You calling the walking through a swamp refreshing?
It is. You're getting your feet.
Yeah,
it's
man.
Nice and cool. And if you have some gators on your shoes, then you don't have to worry about anything getting in your shoes. And I think people's fear comes from really the animals you're going to find in there.
So that's what that's where I was going next. So my listeners know that I hate snakes, and again, I've been in Vermont my whole life. We don't have venom. God, I always mess that word up.
Venomous.
See, I always say venomous. Poisonous snakes. I know that's not correct technically, but
poisonous is not correct. They're venomous.
I know people give me shit for that sometimes. But anyways, we don't have dangerous snakes. So even on the Appalachian Trail, that was a little bit sketchy for me. So and of course, there's no water moccasins on the AT, or at least not for most of it. So water moccasins kind of freak me out a little bit. You're walking through a swamp. I feel like it might be harder to see them. I don't know what's freaking floating around in there. So that's honestly what really gets me, like, more than just getting my feet wet. It's more like the snakes and shit. And, like, I don't know. I'm not from Florida.
Well,
so.
You actually mentioned a really good thing. You said floating around in there. And that's the biggest point. These snakes don't sink. They just float on the top. So you never have to worry about the snake being under the water, like waiting for you. You will always see what looks like this wet, hose just curled up on the water or something. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. But also, over my 2 through hikes, my first through hike, I didn't see a single snake for the entire 1,100 miles. And the second through hike, I only saw 2 venomous snakes. And both of those were right next to each other. So, you may not see any at all.
Were they water moccasins?
Kind of felt like,
or copperheads? What were they?
Yeah, those were water moccasins the second time around. And it's definitely something to be concerned about. You don't want to go out in the wilderness and just be like head in the clouds totally all the time. It's same with like weather. You always want to be checking about the weather and thinking about the weather.
Yeah.
It's similar, you want to be looking where you're walking, and that goes for any trail with the copperheads on the AT. You don't want to just be stepping on one because you're not paying attention. Mm-hmm. But I've kind of figured over, all of my section hiking and through hiking in Florida and stuff, that I've only seen 1 water moccasin per every 1,000 miles that I've hiked here.
Yeah. Okay.
So
that's a little bit more reassuring, I guess.
Yeah. So that's with the water moccasins. And then another thing to consider, and this also goes for the alligators, is that you're hiking the Florida Trail in the winter. These animals are cold-blooded. So these animals, they are just lethargic. They are, it's cold out. The water is cold. These animals just want to soak up the sun. They do not have the energy to deal with you. They do not have the energy to be doing anything, so hiking it in the winter, you're really not going to have any problems with alligators and snakes. You may see them. We certainly saw alligators, but all of them were like way, way off trail. So the winter is really, it's the time to hike. Say you're hiking in Florida, you're coming out to do the Florida Trail in June. You'd run into many, many more problems other than the animals. But June is like alligator mating season. I was actually, a long time ago, I was actually bluff charged by an alligator during mating season.
Damn.
So that is the middle of summer. That is when it's hottest, and that's when the alligators and the snakes are the most active. In the winter, they're just not active. They do not want to deal with you. They do not want to have anything to do with you. So,
dude, talking about alligators, like in the context of a thru hike, that's like a foreign concept to me. Like hearing you say, like when you said alligators the first time there, it like clicked in my head. I was like, damn, that's actually crazy. That's like
they're awesome.
Not used to that.
It's Jurassic. They're dinosaurs. So it's really cool to see them, but you don't generally see them in your path. They're almost always just like way off to the side. And, maybe if you're like 1 foot tall and, weigh like 20 pounds, then maybe an alligator would be interested in you. But as like a human, 6 feet tall, 5 feet tall, whatever, however much you weigh, like, we are just way too big to have to deal with.
Right.
Yeah.
Do they like try to get your food and shit like bears do?
No.
Hang an alligator back.
There was one time, and this was also like hiking in the summer, where I was camping near like a river, and an alligator was just like staring at me from where I was camping. So I got a little bit like, I don't enjoy being looked at by this alligator, so I wound up like packing up my stuff and moving. It's not going to bother me, but it just bothered me. You know what I mean?
Well, that seems pretty fucking sketchy. I would agree with that. So
yeah, so that's pretty uncommon, especially in the winter. So
what's I definitely asked Baker this question too, but say dead of winter, I don't know, January. Like, what are you looking at for temperatures down there?
Yeah, so temperatures here are pretty crazy. They vary wildly. We had temperatures this time around. I think our coldest night was 27 degrees with wind chills of like 20.
In Florida?
And then yes. So we woke up to frost on everything and wound up wearing all of our clothes for the entire day. Temperatures never rose above like 40 that day. And then towards the end of our hike, once you're starting to get into like March, I think our hottest day was probably the high 80s.
Wow. Damn.
So most nights are pretty mild, where you're sleeping in like 40 degree, 50 degree temps or something like that. But you do have these swings of it could be hotter and it could certainly also be colder. I've said in the past that actually my coldest nights ever through hiking, and this goes for hiking the International AT or the AT or hiking through the Sierra on the PCT or anything. My coldest nights have actually been in Florida.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Also, side note, hearing you talk about the International AT, I've got some questions about that in a minute, because I've always wondered about that trail, and I'm pretty sure someone sent me a message a few days ago asking me to talk about that trail. Anyways, okay, so other bad things I hear about the Florida Trail. So the most obvious is like the swamps and the snakes and I guess the alligators and shit. How about, and again, I don't know very much about this trail, so this is what I hear, like road walking and not really like being, because like I said before we started recording, talking to Alex, dude had a freaking skateboard with him. So can you just talk about the road walking? Because, obviously people don't like to road walk a lot of the time.
Yeah, well, I have one more quick little thing to add about the swamps. If you go southbound, you actually don't have to go into a swamp until you're like 200 or 300 miles into your hike. So, go southbound if you don't like the swamps, and by that time you're too far into it to care.
Yeah, nice.
But so the road walking is certainly a thing, and I kind of equate it, people coming directly from the Pacific Crest Trail or directly from the Appalachian Trail, they've been on these trails that are in such good shape and such good health health with, so much support and volunteers, and those trails can really get things done, and you're not going to do much road walking on those trails, as you know. The PCT may have like a few miles here and there, the AT has a few miles here and there, but so many other trails beyond the Florida Trail, the Shelterway Trace Trail, the Pacific Northwest Trail had a lot, so many of these smaller trails out there just don't have that support, don't have these volunteers, and don't have these people advocating for them and, complaining to local governments about that type of stuff, So the Florida Trail has road walking, but so do all of these small trails. You're not going to find very many that don't, other than the Uinta Highline Trail and the Arizona Trail. I guess the Arizona Trail has a lot of Forest Service roads, so even that, but the AZT is really a model trail for any of these other national scenic trails out there, or any of the other national recreation trails or anything. But yeah, the Florida Trail has it, and I guess the one big thing for me was, since I hiked this trail 3 years ago, the big thing that I noticed was just that, so many of the shorter road walks that I'd hiked or I'd walked, these roads years ago, a lot of them have actually already been rerouted into the woods.
So it's changing, yeah.
It's changing, and it's changing fast. So there was many sections where I, hiked it before. I was telling Lotus, like, all right, up here we're going to go right on this road, and we'll follow that for a few miles. We get there, and the trail just crosses the road and goes into the woods again. And I'm like, nice. Well, that's weird. That's new. So the road walks are changing, and they're disappearing. And I feel like the best way to to continue them disappearing is just have more people out there, showing interest in this trail, whether that's section hiking or volunteering or anything like that, but yeah, so for the northbound hikers, the road walking is really the worst. Again, the southbound hikers got it good, and that's why I've gone southbound twice. Southbound, you're starting out, you're walking 30 miles to the beaches, and then you're entering into this wilderness, and it's just beautiful for so many miles, for hundreds of miles, where you just don't really have to deal with much of that stuff that no one wants to deal with, the roads and all that, swamps.
Yeah.
Whereas the northbounders, they get a really incredible 30-mile start where you're hiking through this amazing swamp, big cypress. And then you begin bike paths for a long ways, like dirt roads for a long ways. So northbound hikers really got it hard to start. But generally once you get into the hike, and once you're, certainly the entire center of the hike, the middle areas, there's not that much to deal with. There's 3 major road walks out there. One of them's up near the Swanee River, and that one is all dirt roads, and the churches are all friendly. They let you sleep at the churches.
Cool.
And,
okay, cool.
So that we hardly even saw any traffic. Then there's another one kind of in Central Florida that's long, and again, not really much traffic. And then the ones down south, where those are a little bit harsher, but so the road walking is a thing, but I've been happy to see and happy to report that, it's changing. And hopefully in the coming years, 5 years, 10 years, a lot more of those will disappear. And I have ideas looking at maps and, having done this trail so many times, I'd love to talk to the Florida Trail Association or the Forest Service, about my ideas on how to reroute this trail to avoid those. Because there's certainly areas where, the trail can just be rerouted, where the road walk would be a lot shorter, and you'd get to experience this whole new section of trail and this whole new section of wilderness.
Yeah, man.
So, the wilderness is out there. It's just up to the association and up to the Forest Service to, change that and make that be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously not all road walks are created equal, kind of, you just alluded to that.
That is true.
Because there's a big difference between walking on a Forest Service road, which I happen to enjoy quite a bit, especially in the context of a longer hike, gives you a little bit of a break, versus hiking on a nice paved. Yeah, oh dude, for sure. I'm all about Forest Service roads, honestly. But then, hiking on a paved highway where you're out in the open and maybe there's traffic, it fucking sucks. Yeah. Exactly. So
there's one very short road walk like that, and even that one, it's so short, you knock it out in an hour and you're done with it.
Okay, so it's not too bad.
Not too bad, but yeah, I kind of feel like with the road walks, don't let that shy you away too much. Because if you find the scenery in Florida, the pictures I've posted online or the videos I've posted of Florida, if you find the scenery beautiful, then, I think that's like really the important part. And if push came to shove, I know some people just skip the road walks. There's a guy that's hiked the Florida Trail like 7 or 8 times. His name is Grits. Every single year he's out there through hiking it. And he says he's done 3 honest through hikes. Or in other words, he skipped some road walks those other like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
So if you enjoy the scenery and you think that's cool, that we got a lot of cool rivers and cool birds and you want to see some alligators and stuff, then I think that should be the thing.
So why don't you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because like my next quote bad quote thing that I was going to bring up about the trail was going to be the fact that Florida is flat as fuck and there's no mountain views and all this epic stuff, right? So obviously people, especially us up in the Northeast, and I'm sure people out West as well, are used to these, epic, mountain views and stuff. And obviously you're not going to get those in Florida. So why don't you just go ahead and talk about the scenery? Because again, I haven't really been down there that much, so I'm just kind of curious. I just picture like swamps and forests and shit, but I'd like to hear about that stuff.
Sure, yeah. The scenery in Florida, I mean, heading southbound, you start out with like 30 miles of walking on a beach, and you're hiking over these like sand dunes that are, maybe 30, 40 feet tall. So that's really cool.
Can you like, sorry to cut you off, but can you like camp on the beach? Because that sounds kind of
sick. You can camp on the beach. Funny enough, I've lived in Florida my whole life, and I had never camped on the beach until I hiked the Florida Trail. So you can camp out there. And
how like remote are the beaches there? Are you like walking, by like proper like houses and stuff too? Like while you're on the beach, like 'cause that's the only like beach I can picture, I guess.
Yeah, it's split up. You're walking on it's the Gulf Islands National Seashore, which I don't think there's very many national seashores in the country. Maybe like 10 of them, and a few of them are in Florida. But yeah, so you're hiking Gulf Islands National Seashore, and this is actually an area. The Truman Show was just filmed down the road from the Florida Trail there.
Oh, cool.
If you're a fan of that, I love that movie, so that's pretty cool. Yeah. But yeah, so the beaches are kind of like split up. You hike maybe 10 miles of just along the beaches. It's pretty remote. You're not really going to see many other people. Like you may see some cars off in the distance. And then you kind of enter this like more civilized area with some restaurants. So our first day of the Florida Trail, we got to eat at a nice restaurant, got some burgers and stuff, some French fries, and then you enter another like 20 miles of beaches that are also like pretty remote. Again, you may see some people here or there that are parked and hanging out at the beaches. You may see some cars in the distance, but generally the sand dunes are big enough where you don't really see any of that.
Interesting.
So you just get to hear the crashing of the ocean, and yeah.
See, one of the things I'm picking up from this conversation so far is just that it's going to be just such a unique experience, right? Like it's just like,
well, the diversity throughout the state is, it's definitely flat. It's absolutely flat. There's no mountains, but even that kind of has its own benefits where, I was hoping to use the Florida Trail this year as kind of a primer to another hike. The Florida Trail only takes like a month and a half to 2 months to do it, so that's not the biggest commitment in the world. You can do that and then go off and do the Appalachian Trail or do the Pacific Crest Trail or something, and you have your legs under you. Yeah, so it's a nice, the flat, it's a nice break, and it's, when I was hiking south on the Appalachian Trail, right after that, I did the Pinhoti Trail and the Florida Trail. I was so excited to be done with mountains. I was done climbing up those big climbs. I was done hurting my knees going down the inclines and stuff. So, to just have flat for a ways, it may take a few days to get used to just the flatness, the not varied terrain to kind of give your muscles different workouts, but that certainly has its benefits as well.
And I think another, and probably the biggest selling point about this trail for me, and this is like no shit because it's Florida, but just the time of year that you hike it is like opposite of like everything else, especially up here in the Northeast. So if I ever wanted to do like a longer backpacking trip in the middle of the winter, I'd pretty much have to be going to the Florida Trail, or at least something like, that far south or pretty far down there.
Yeah, the Florida Trail, the Ouachita Trail, I thought would be a good winter hike, so that would certainly be snowing and stuff. So, winter, but more mild than maybe up north, or maybe like Southern California type stuff. But even then, if you're getting high up in elevation, like people may look at the Arizona Trail like, oh, it's desert, you can hike it in the winter, but no, it's very high elevation. There's not too many options in the States to hike in the winter, but they're certainly out there. So I love to point that out too. And I know a trail maintainer, a friend of mine, he hiked the Appalachian Trail like in, 2005 or maybe even earlier than that. And he had little pamphlets that said, where else are you going to hike? And it said the Florida Trail.
Oh, nice.
Or where else are you going to hike in the winter? The Florida Trail. So, it's a good place to come, whether you're coming doing a section hike or, just checking out some scenery, doing a through hike.
So my last, potentially, this is going to be a dumb one, honestly, but when I think of Florida, and I know other people up here or that haven't been to Florida very much might think this, I think of, especially the parts that are not like in the big tourist cities, I think of being like kind of sketchy. I don't know, like fucking meth heads and shit. So I don't know, and especially if you're going to be on roads a lot, again, kind of stupid question, but are there any parts that are like unsafe or like kind of sketchy in that regard?
I haven't really run into that. The one thing that might be of concern is hunting season. There are certain areas. There's like this 100-mile stretch up north, Apalachicola National Forest, where, it is a very popular hunting destination. So a lot of hunters come out there. So that would be the only concern with like maybe people messing with you or something. But I haven't really run into any of that myself. I've always been able to find a really secluded like stealth spot. I haven't really had any like bad interactions with people. But certainly keep your wits about you. I think in a lot of ways, the vast majority of the towns you go through are so small that it's like there's nothing there for the homeless people. The homeless people go to the bigger cities where they can get, the handouts and they can get more benefits and stuff like that. So
Okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of a dumb question, but I don't know. I always think of like this, like in the Florida man, like kind of thing, there's always like some weird shit going on there. So I just had to throw that out there. Dude, I think you're doing a good job of selling me on this trail. I still don't know if I'd go for a through hike still, but I am like interested to actually like go down there and do like a section or something, because again,
come down, do a section, see what you think. Come do the Swanee River, or here's the biggest thing I love about Florida. Florida has more natural springs than any other state in the country.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Florida Trail actually passes by like, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them or something, along the way. So if you're coming down and you're just visiting and you got a rental car, you could just hit spring after spring after spring. You could buy like a little mask and snorkel and dive down into these like caves and stuff. So on the Florida Trail, you're hiking through Ocala National Forest, and you can just dip off trail. It's like a 0.2 side trail to go to Juniper Springs, where you can swim and wash off, and they got like a concession stand with ice cream and, microwavable food. You can dip off trail and do like the half-mile side trail to Alexander Springs, or there's Salt Springs and Silver Glen Springs, and up north there's like I think Devil's Hole is one we swam at that. There's no one comes to this like one spot, Devil's Hole, and it's just us like swimming there in that spring, and it was awesome. So, if the through hike doesn't call to you, don't push it. Just come out, try it, give it a shot some winter, if you got some time off and you got a little money or whatever, give it a little section a go and see what you think.
Yeah, man. It sounds it sounds slightly more enticing now, not gonna lie.
Yeah, but again, I feel like, if you don't want to do the Florida Trail, that's cool too. There's a lot of trails out there that are awesome that I'm sure would call to you more.
Oh yeah. It's tough during the winter though, there's not too many options.
Yeah, you bet.
What about resupply? So again, Baker talked about that in our episode, but are there any like unique considerations in terms of resupply, specific to the Florida Trail?
It is so easy. The resupply is so easy. There are so many days where, and here's a benefit of like some road walks every now and then, is that you're going to pass by a gas station, you're going to pass by a convenience store, or maybe you're walking through a big town or something. But, there are days where we could have stopped and gone to a restaurant like twice that day. Or, there are days where like earlier on in the day, we would hit a gas station, and then later on in the day, we'd be at near like a supermarket.
Okay.
So the resupply is super easy. I think on average, we were going about 60 miles in between towns. And that's, including the one or two like longer carries, the 120 mile or whatever. Most of the time you're like only a day away, 2 days away from resupply.
Okay, it's not really bad.
Never have to carry very much food. And I personally love that. And the one issue is that a lot of these places are very small towns or very small stores. So the selection isn't great. The first time I did this trail, I sent myself 100% boxes, resupply boxes the whole way.
Oh, wow.
That's just how I like to operate. That's how I did the Appalachian Trail and so many other trails. I just love resupply boxes. This second trail, I only sent 3, to a couple spots where I knew like, there's not much here. I'm going to want better foods.
Yeah.
So if I had to do it a third time, I'd probably do more resupply boxes just to get like that nicer stuff. But, generally these places, you can find that beef jerky, you can find that tuna, the chips, whatever you want. It's just if maybe you're more of a health conscious hiker, less of the sugary stuff, then, maybe a few more resupply boxes here and there would make you happy.
Dude, you're the first hiker I've ever heard say that they like sending resupply boxes.
Oh, I love it, dude. It's like, I put in all the work before I leave for the hike. And then once I'm on the hike, I just have to go into town, pick up my box, and I can leave. I don't have to think about how many days I need worth of food. I don't have to go into the grocery store and count out calories for, every day that I'm going to be out, and try and figure that out. It's already done. It's already figured out. I can go into town and just actually enjoy it.
Interesting.
Or I can just leave quick. Yeah. So if you're trying to like hike faster or hike more miles or,
I can see that.
Save money by doing a trail a little bit quicker, resupply boxes is a great way to kind of save on time. And
Dude, that's funny.
And people, you hear that term, the town vortex, all the time. That's because you get to town and you're trying to think of all the chores you got to do, and you're putting some of them off. Maybe you're not doing laundry yet, or you don't want to go to the grocery store to resupply. You just want to eat. So with resupply boxes, it's just like it helps you get in and out. You don't get stuck in that vortex.
Interesting. So, like I said, I don't hear many people say they like resupply boxes. And
I know.
I'm not a big fan, so that was just that was surprising. And I understand on some trails, like they're a necessity. But even on like the AT, damn, that's crazy.
Most people wouldn't recommend resupply boxes, and I wouldn't either. I kind of say to most people, like, if you know, if if resupply boxes are going to benefit you, then you're going to be already doing it. You probably don't need to ask if resupply boxes are for you.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a special diet, or maybe you just want to eat healthier, or maybe you want to go quicker, So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, they're definitely, I'm not saying you should never, ever carry them. Obviously, there are some circumstances and some trails, like I said, that you just have to send them because there's no other options. But, that's interesting. It's good to have like a balance of opinions on resupply boxes, because I'm pretty sure I've railed against them a couple times in previous episodes.
Oh, yeah, a lot of people do, and I totally understand. There's some people where I remember this one guy who had packaged all his resupply boxes up before he started his hike, and he's 200 miles into like a 2,000 mile trail, maybe even less, 100 miles in, and I remember seeing him post on Facebook that like, hey, I hate every single thing in my resupply box. I can't eat this. I'm out like $2,000.
Oh, damn.
So some people it really, really is bad, but for others it works great.
Yeah.
And that's why I say, like, if you know,
It's true.
I certainly wouldn't be sending yourself like bone broth. Like, remember, it's got to be stuff that you're actually going to enjoy, because you're certainly not going to enjoy a lot of things out there. You're going to be like, why did I do this to myself?
I'm so sick of peanut butter and fucking all that shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, the only food I've ever gotten sick of and I can't eat anymore is dark chocolate. I can't eat any more dark chocolate.
What? Yeah. Dude, I literally had dark chocolate like right before we started recording.
I know, I can't
touch
chocolate. This stuff. I had it like, nearly every day on the Appalachian Trail, and now I can never touch it again.
Damn, that's unfortunate. Dark chocolate. It's good. Dude, let's talk about the IAT, International Appalachian Trail, just for a second. So I've always been curious about this trail because I've like looked up information, and I've found decent information about from Katahdin to the New Brunswick
That's
border?
actually surprising to me because the best information out there that I've found is for the Quebec section.
Really?
Whereas from Katahdin through Maine to the United States border there, there used to be a guidebook for it. I don't know if you can still buy that guidebook. I actually found it in one of the shelters up there, and I carried it to the shelter closest to Katahdin and left it there for hopefully a northbound hiker.
See, when I say I found information, I basically mean I found a couple documents that had the route, right? But beyond that, I'm pretty thoroughly confused. So I guess first of all,
oh yeah,
did you? What were the circumstances of your hike? Did you do it right after you did the AT?
Well, actually, I connected the IAT to the AT to the Pinhoti Trail to the Florida Trail to Key West. So
you're one of the nut jobs that did that shit?
Yeah, so
Dude,
in 2016, I hiked 5,000 miles from northern Quebec down to Key West, Florida.
I actually didn't know. I knew you'd done all that stuff. I didn't realize you did it all at once. That's crazy.
Yeah, I did all that in one go.
So you weren't just talking about the northern part of the IAT. You were talking about straight up just the whole fucking thing. Damn, that's crazy.
Well, so I went southbound on that hike, and I think a lot of people would probably as they're finishing up the Appalachian Trail, if they still have some steam in them, they might consider continuing on past Katahdin up north. But I say if you're only going to go to the U.S. border, don't bother. The main section has some cool areas along the IAT, but it's a lot of bike paths and stuff like that, which is nice, but it's much, much better if you're letting those bike paths lead into the real gem of the International Trail, and that is Quebec. Quebec is incredible. It is so amazing. It is so remote. You're hiking along the coastlines of Quebec where you're looking out into the ocean and you're watching seals that are watching you, and you're hiking along these boulders.
I gotta look it up on Google Maps.
Yeah, look up Gaspésie Provincial Park, I think it is.
Okay.
Gaspésie Provincial Park is basically the whites of New Hampshire, where you're above tree line for so long, but you have this added benefit of there's caribou up there, there's moose, and then unlike the whites where you're running into so many people, you're one of the few people out there who are hiking it.
Yeah.
So it's just incredible, and just so lush. And they actually got this I guess a grant a long time ago. And they use that money to build shelters. So every
no way. That's sick.
20 kilometers or something, there's a shelter. And actually every 40 kilometers or something, they built a freaking log cabin. A cabin with bunk beds and a wood stove, and
damn.
So it's really, really incredible. If you want to do the International Appalachian Trail, I'd recommend just doing Quebec.
Dude, I'm looking at some pictures right now. This looks sweet for sure.
It's 400 miles, so it's just a great distance to get out there and see this other country.
Is most of the Quebec section on actual trail as opposed to road walks and bike paths and stuff?
Yeah, so the entire New Brunswick section, except for the middle, is a bike path. The entire New Brunswick section. So that's I want to say 175 miles or 200 miles. And then about half of Maine is trails, and then the other half is bike paths or road. So really the gem of the IAT is Quebec. And, hopefully that changes in the coming years, because I think northern Maine is beautiful. And then the New Brunswick section, you go right by the park with the highest point, New Brunswick, but the trail doesn't even go in.
Oh, damn.
So Quebec is the best part.
Dude, that's super cool.
And then it's just all these French people, French Canadians, and I remember sitting outside of this this little motel that just opened, and I'm just sitting outside with the owner, this French guy, just sipping wine and watching the Aurora Borealis over the coast. It's yeah.
Dude, I was going to ask you about that because obviously I live less than 100 miles from the Quebec border, and so I've been up there a decent amount. Not that part of Quebec. I've been to the Montreal part of Quebec, but
Montreal's
just
cool
resupplying with people that I know they still speak English and stuff, but just a different language. I feel that'd be kind of interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, they have a lot of pride. They're very they love Quebec. There's been movements every year to try and secede from Canada.
They almost did, dude, straight up.
Yeah.
The referendum back in like the early 2000s, I think it was like almost a dead tie vote, some crazy shit.
Yeah, so it gets very close. They love their nation, and they got a lot of pride for their nation. They got a lot of love. So, I feel it's just out of respect that, if you're going to go do that trail, you should learn some basic French words, just like how to say hello or...
It'd be kind of fun, honestly.
Yeah, it is. And if you're a really friendly person, then they're just going to be friendly back. Some of them are not going to like that you're only speaking English to them, but I feel like if you just try and you have at least bonjour, then they're going to be like, oh, this person at least I don't know. That's the way I felt. I ran into just so many nice people, and I felt like there was only one waiter that kind of gave me the stink eye.
Yeah.
Even there was this homeless guy that I was talking to. I was totally lost, and this homeless guy was trying to give me directions in French, and he was just like the nicest dude in the world, and he sat with me for like 20-30 minutes, just like with my map kind of telling me where I went.
Nice.
I didn't understand like a word, but he actually got me back on trail.
That's so good. So did you where does it end? Because I've heard even like some people say it goes all the way until like freaking like Europe or whatever, or not Europe.
Yeah, the Appalachian Mountains, I guess, were kind of split long ago when
Greenland,
the continents were split. Yeah, so it if you want to be that guy, you could say that the Appalachian Trail mountains continue like through the sea and then down south through like Europe and stuff. But basically, you could do two things that I feel are legit and people have actually done. You could start all the way up in Newfoundland. Newfoundland looks kind of cool, and there's certainly a lot of wilderness up there. So I would recommend, if you're a very experienced hiker, to just make your own route through Newfoundland. Otherwise, I think the official trail is kind of following like roads and stuff through Newfoundland.
Interesting.
And the reason I didn't do that section was not for the road or whatever. It was actually because you have to take a boat from Newfoundland to Nova Scotia, and then through Nova Scotia, there's like bike paths that you take to Quebec, and I think you take like a shuttle from Nova Scotia to, I don't know. It's weird once you get north of Quebec.
That's what I was going to ask you about, because that's where like my information started to just get blurry. So
the reason I started at the northern point of like the Gaspésie Peninsula in Quebec was, that is where the Appalachian Mountains disappear into the ocean.
Yeah.
They disappear. So you're standing on top of this massive cliff, and there's no more mountains. It's just ocean. So I feel like that is a very logical end point or start point.
Makes sense to me.
But if there's certainly a lot of people, and even the guy that kind of created the route has said like, oh, the official, if I don't even consider my own hikes that didn't end in Newfoundland official hikes. And it's like, whatever, dude. So yeah, I think like Quebec, it's awesome. And, Newfoundland is cool, but I don't know. If you're not inspired to do the bike paths through Nova Scotia and take the boat to Newfoundland to walk some roads, and just end in Quebec.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Dude, that's so cool. And like, I don't hear from many people who hike up there, and it's relatively close for me. I mean,
I was the only thru-hiker that year. The only thru-hiker. Yeah.
Classic.
So
isn't there like a section that follows? Maybe I'm making this up. I feel like I saw this somewhere, though. There's like a section that follows the border between the U.S. and Canada, like the literal border, like the clearing and shit.
That's actually really cool. So I headed south, so walking through New Brunswick, I'm coming up to the border crossing, and I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Where's the trail going to go? Does it go through the woods? Do I just cross silently? And I saw in my guidebook, it says to call Border Patrol and tell them, hey, I'm hiking the International Appalachian Trail. I'm going to be hiking along the border between, this area and this area. If you guys are out there, say hello. Thanks. And I did that, and everything was cool. But so when I'm coming up to the border crossing, you actually get off like the trail and you get on a little road just briefly, and you walk through the border crossing with all the cars. So there I was standing in line with all these cars, just waiting to get, checked out or whatever. I get up to the border crossing and the guy's like, oh, so what are you doing? And it's like, well, I've been hiking in Canada for the past month or whatever, and I'm heading back into the United States. I'm from Florida. And he's like, awesome, have fun. So it didn't check me out, nothing. So that was super easy. But then it's called the Border Trail. And just like, you've seen in Pacific Crest Trail finish photos where behind the monument, there's just this long expanse of grass that has been kind of clear cut, to represent this is the border between the United States and Canada. And you actually walk along that for, I think, 10 miles.
That's so cool.
It was pretty cool. And it was interesting to see that like every mile or every kilometer, even less than a mile, like 0.6, there was this monument that stood, either 1 foot tall or there were some that were like 5 feet tall. Every kilometer there was this like these monuments that said United States, Canada. And I thought, how funny is this? A place that absolutely no one goes. And here we erect these like little monuments like every mile. Yeah,
it's cool, man. I know exactly what you're talking about because the long trail, it's like this. Well, you don't walk along the border there, but when you get to the Canadian border, there's one of those monuments there, and it's just like it's cool.
It's like the same exact style.
Yeah, it's cool, man. Dude, let's do a story. We're at the end of the episode here. I'm gonna have you back on at some point because I have a lot more questions. And let's be real, you've done a lot of shit. You could probably talk about this stuff for ages. But anyways,
I'd love to come back and talk about all the things I loved about the Pacific Northwest Trail or the Uinta Highline Trail.
I haven't talked about either one of those trails on the show yet, so let's do it, dude. Let's do it.
That'd be awesome.
But anyways, a story. So I know I gave you a pretty decent heads up compared to a lot of my guests, so sounds like you got one ready to go. So let's hear it.
Yeah, well, you asked me about like my favorite story from being on trail or through hiking, and it's so hard to kind of think back of all these times. It's like, well, I did it, I loved it, and sometimes a picture will bring up memories and stuff, but it's hard to just think about one thing. But I did actually have one on the top of my head, actually from the Florida Trail.
Perfect.
And it was from my first time I hiked the Florida Trail. I was actually, since I had started up in Canada, at this point I was like, nearly 4,000 miles into my hike. I had not seen anyone in like 300 miles or something, not a single other hiker at all through like Alabama or southern Georgia. And I get to the Florida Trail and I wanted to set a speed record. So that's a whole other thing. I wound up being successful with that. But anyway, so I get to the Florida Trail and this is like my second night camping. I hadn't seen anyone in forever and I'm just sitting down on this bench, maybe eating a snack or something. And here comes these two hikers, it's this lady and this guy. And, I can see from a distance, they're kind of looking at me like they didn't expect to see anyone else out here. I didn't expect to see anyone else out here. And I'm sure it's much weirder for someone who's just out for the night. Maybe they don't know me. They don't know if I'm homeless or what I'm about, So we get to talking, I'm generally a pretty friendly guy, generally pretty talkative and stuff. And I'm telling them about this like trip, that I've been on these like all these miles in the Appalachian Trail and all hiking through Alabama and stuff. And, they were just like, they were so stoked about it. They had heard of the Florida Trail in the past and, they had lived in this area forever. And, this was Kelly and Sean. Kelly and Sean, if anyone's hiked the Florida Trail in the past like 3 years, they know of these people. These are Florida Trail trail angel extraordinaires. I was the first through hiker that they had ever run into.
Oh,
and
nice.
They were just like so stoked about this whole through hiking thing. They were just, after meeting me, they've told me that they just went online and just, started following all these other through hikers and following the Florida Trail through hikers. And, that year, I think they hosted like 20 through hikers at their house.
Nice.
Cleaned us and laundered us and brought us to restaurants and gas station or supermarket, whatever. And just like, that picked up my spirits so much that, these were the first people I'd run into in so long. And these were like, and then to run into them again this year and to hear about, that they've been hosting all these hikers and helping out with the Florida Trail and volunteering to do trail maintenance. And
wow.
I just thought like, it is so amazing. You never know who you're going to run into. you never know the type of impression you're going to leave on someone. And that's why I always try and say, like, be friendly. When you get to these towns, when you're talking to these people, like, there's going to be some other hiker someday that's going to come up behind you, and these people may run into them too, and you never know. You never know. Kelly and Sean Sean actually thru-hiked the Florida Trail this year while Kelly was still hosting hikers at their house.
Wow.
And so that's just something that came to mind when you were asking about a favorite story. And, I just thought you just never know the type of people you'll meet, and you never know the type of stuff you might inspire.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. You never know what kind of influence you're going to leave. So that's really cool. That's one of the more uplifting, positive stories that I've heard on the show. I mean, there's been other ones too, but there's also been some not so positive ones. So that's good to hear. I can
certainly think of some bad ones too, but and especially the other side of the stone, coming up behind other hikers who left a bad impression and what that was like. So be friendly out there. Be nice to these towns. A lot of them they're just now realizing that they have this new income that's entering their city, that's coming to their small businesses.
Especially as, thru-hiking is becoming more and more popular and all this stuff. So
yeah, tell them about the trail. Tell them you're staying at the local motel, that you're eating at the local restaurant, that you're buying all this food. Tell them you're a hiker, you're thru-hiking, and that there's more behind you.
That's so awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Well, Jupiter, thank you so much, man. Like I said, we're going to do another one shortly. We're all stuck inside right now, so we're going to do it. Yeah, man. Thank you so much. Why don't you go ahead and just let everybody know where they can go follow you, watch your stuff, all that stuff.
Sure, yeah. I'm Jupiter. You can check me out if you search Jupiter Hikes on Instagram, Jupiter Hikes on Facebook, Jupiter Hikes on YouTube. I post YouTube videos at least once a week.
Very,
sometimes
very
more
good
than
videos.
that.
I'm a big fan.
Thank you. Yeah, so I even have a blog with all sorts of like guides on how to hike, different things throughout the Florida Trail, and just all my experiences hiking from Canada to Key West. And so Jupiter Hikes, I mainly post on Instagram and YouTube.
Cool, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, dude.
Of course. And thanks to everybody for listening as well. Have a good one.